It was a chilly Monday morning in downtown Chicago, the kind that made your breath fog up and your nerves feel twice as sharp. Danielle Carter stood outside one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, Maison d'Argent. She clutched a leather-bound folder tight to her chest, her knuckles pale against the dark material. Inside that folder was her resume, neat, polished, the product of years of grinding in hot kitchens and dealing with even hotter egos. Danielle was in her mid-20s, tall, confident, and the kind of woman who carried herself like she had something to prove, not to herself, but to everyone else who ever doubted her. Her curly hair was tied back, blazer pressed, shoes shining. She took one deep breath, then whispered to herself, "All right, girl. You got this." As she stepped toward the restaurant's side entrance, the one marked for staff and deliveries, the city noise seemed to fade behind her. This wasn't just any job. It was a shot at something real, something that could finally put her name on the map. She reached for the handle. And just like that, her story began. Just as Danielle reached for the door, it swung open from the inside. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a stained chef's coat and a look that said he ran the place. This was Mark Evans, the head chef. Mid-40s, white, with a permanent sneer that looked like it had been carved into his face over years of unchecked ego. He saw Danielle and stopped dead in his tracks, giving her a once-over like she was a delivery gone wrong. "You lost or something?" he asked, voice thick with attitude. Danielle straightened her shoulders and spoke clearly with that quiet kind of confidence that made people pay attention. "I'm here for the chef interview." Mark raised an eyebrow. Then came the laugh, short, sharp, and mean. The kind of laugh that made your skin crawl. "You?" he said, cocking his head. "This ain't no fast food joint, sweetheart. People like you don't cook anything I'd put on a plate." The words hit like a slap, casual, cruel, and soaked in arrogance. But Danielle didn't flinch. She simply reached into her folder and held out her resume. Mark took it, glanced at the cover, and before she could say another word, he tossed it down like it was trash. "Yeah, okay," he muttered. "Fake degrees, fake names. Think I can't spot a phony? Save yourself the embarrassment." Danielle's jaw tightened. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just picked her resume off the ground, brushed it off, and turned around to leave. And as she walked away, head held high, Mark just watched, smirking like he'd already won. What he didn't know was that this story was far from over. Danielle had barely made it to the edge of the parking lot when a sleek black BMW pulled up beside the curb. The engine purred low, and out stepped a man in a tailored gray suit, with just enough southern charm in his swagger to let you know he wasn't from around here. James Whitaker, owner of Maison d'Argent, late 50s, white, silver hair slicked back, the kind of man who shook hands with celebrities and still held the door open for strangers. He spotted Danielle instantly. "Danielle Carter?" he called out, squinting in the morning sun. She paused, turned halfway, surprise flickering across her face. "Yes, sir," she said cautiously. James frowned as he walked toward her. "Why you heading out? You were supposed to be here at 9, right?" Danielle looked down for a second. Her lips parted like she was about to tell him everything. The insults, the resume on the ground, the way Mark had looked at her like she didn't belong. But instead, she just gave a tight smile and shook her head. "It's fine," she said softly. "I just figured maybe it's not a good fit." James studied her for a second. Then, he wasn't dumb. He could read the tension in her shoulders and the way her fingers clutched that folder, like it was her last line of defense. He nodded slowly, then said, "Wait here." And with that, he turned and headed inside, not knowing yet that what he was about to uncover would change everything in his kitchen. The kitchen was already in motion when James Whittaker stepped through the back door. Steam hissed from pots, knives clacked against cutting boards, and the scent of garlic and butter hung thick in the air. But all that noise stopped, just for a beat, when the boss walked in. At the prep station stood Mark, sleeves rolled up, barking at a line cook about overcooked scallops. He barely looked up when James approached. "Mark," James said flatly, voice low but firm, "we got a problem." Mark finally glanced his way, wiping his hands on a towel. "Yeah? What kind?" "That young lady outside, Danielle Carter. You sent her away?" Mark snorted, already half smirking. "The girl out front? Yeah, I saw her. She said she was here for a chef interview." He chuckled. "Looked like she got lost on her way to the soup kitchen." James didn't laugh. "She was recommended by Franklin Miles," James said, eyes locked on him. "You know, the same Franklin who trained Gordon Damn Ramsay." Mark's smirk faded, just for a second. Then he waved it off. "Doesn't mean she can cook. Hell, I still doubt she can boil water without burning the pot." James stared at him a moment longer, lips pressed into a thin line. "Doesn't matter what you doubt," he said coolly. "She's here for a trial. I told Franklin I'd give her a fair shot, and that's exactly what I intend to do." Mark didn't reply. He just turned back toward the line, his jaw tight. And somewhere behind that silence, the kitchen air got a little colder, like something had shifted, and not in his favor. Danielle stood just inside the kitchen now, tucked near the wall, hands folded in front of her, quiet but alert. She could feel the eyes, cooks glancing up from cutting boards, dishwashers peeking from behind steamers. No one said anything, but their faces said enough. What's she doing here? Mark didn't say a word to her as he walked past, but James was right behind him. "Danielle," James said warmly, "this is head chef Mark Evans. He'll be overseeing your trial." She nodded politely. "Nice to meet you, chef." Mark didn't even look her way when he said, "Make risotto. Your way. Let's see if the hype's real." It was a test. A real one, but not in the way it should have been. Risotto wasn't just a dish. It was a trap. You mess it up, you're done. You make it perfect, well, they'd still find something to complain about. Danielle moved to a clean station and rolled up her sleeves. Her movements were sharp, smooth, everything in its place. Knife work clean, timing flawless. She didn't talk, didn't stall. She just cooked. But while she stirred the creamy rice, Mark leaned over to Kyle, a nervous-looking intern standing by the walk-in fridge. Kid couldn't have been more than 20, still green behind the ears. "Go give her a hand," Mark muttered. "Be useful. Add a little salt." Kyle blinked. "She didn't ask for." "I said add some salt," Mark snapped, low and fast. "Don't ask questions." Kyle hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, sabotage was set in motion, with Danielle completely unaware. Danielle stood over the pot like a conductor leading an orchestra. Every stir, every flick of the wrist, exact. The rice was nearly done, creaminess just right, steam curling into the air like the dish was breathing on its own. She had worked too hard, fought too long to mess up now. But behind her, Kyle crept up, hands shaking slightly. He glanced around. No one was watching, except Mark, who stood across the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes locked on him. Careful not to make a scene, Kyle moved fast. While Danielle wiped down the counter, he slipped one hand over and poured a heavy handful of salt right into her risotto pot. The grains fell like a hidden avalanche, sinking beneath the surface. Danielle turned just as Kyle pulled his hand away, giving a quick smile, but she didn't notice what he'd done. A minute later, she plated the dish with pride. Clean white porcelain, garnished with parsley and a touch of lemon zest. Elegant but not fussy. She stepped back, wiped her hands, and took a deep breath. Mark and James approached. Mark had that same smug look, like he already knew what was coming. James picked up a spoon first, blew on it, tasted. Then came the wince. Mark tried his and coughed like he'd swallowed ocean water. "Jesus!" Mark barked, slamming the spoon down. "You trying to kill someone with this salt?" Danielle froze. "What?" she said, blinking. "That's not, I tasted it before plating. It was perfect." James looked genuinely shocked, disappointment washing over his face. "Danielle, this is almost inedible." Danielle stepped forward, confused, heart pounding. "Sir, I swear, I didn't add that much salt. I measured everything. I watched it the whole time." But Mark cut her off with a scoff. "Maybe next time try tasting it with your eyes open," he said, loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear. No one defended her. No one said a word. And in that moment, Danielle felt something crack. Not her pride, but the trust she had in being given a fair shot. But the truth was still standing right there in the corner, wearing a guilty look and an apron that smelled like fear. Danielle's heart was pounding in her chest as the words hung heavy in the air. The kitchen had gone quiet, not with support, but with doubt. Danielle felt every eye in the kitchen pierce her like daggers, cold, accusing, unforgiving. Just when it seemed like she'd be swallowed whole by the silence, a quiet voice broke through. "I saw it," said a woman, stepping forward. Tina Morales, one of the cooks, her arms crossed but eyes sharp. "I saw Kyle near Danielle's station. He leaned over when she wasn't looking and dumped salt into her pot." Whispers spread instantly. Kyle's face turned pale, his eyes darting around. "I thought maybe Danielle asked him," Tina added, shaking her head slowly. "But now, I don't think so." James stood still for a moment, the weight of what he'd just heard settling in. His gaze shifted from Danielle's pleading eyes to Mark's tight jaw, the man he'd trusted to run this kitchen. He'd been itching to believe Mark, to keep the peace, but something inside him tugged harder. The possibility that Danielle wasn't lying. Finally, James pulled out his phone with a slow, deliberate movement. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's check the cameras. If there's proof, we'll know exactly what went down." Mark's jaw tightened, the smug grin fading as the first cracks of truth began to show. The kitchen felt like it held its breath as James tapped through the security footage on his phone, then mirrored it onto the big screen near the prep stations. Everyone gathered around, eyes glued to the grainy black and white video. The clock ticked louder than any voice in the room. The camera showed Danielle working calmly at her station, focused and precise. Then Kyle appeared, glancing nervously around before inching closer. In slow motion, Kyle's hand reached toward Danielle's risotto pot, hesitated for a second, and then dumped a heavy handful of salt right inside. The room erupted in murmurs, eyes widening. Mark's face went pale, the arrogance draining from him. James looked over at Danielle, whose eyes shimmered with a mix of relief and disbelief. "This changes everything," James said quietly. "Mark, you're done. Mark's shoulders slumped as he realized the jig was up. James turned back to Danielle. "Welcome to Maison d'Argent as our new head chef." Cheers and applause burst out around the kitchen, some cooks clapping her on the back, others still stunned. Danielle smiled, heart full. She'd fought hard, but this was more than just a win. It was proof that talent, honesty, and grit could break through even the toughest walls. And for the first time, the kitchen felt like it belonged to her.